On a Tuesday evening in March of 1981, at a restaurant called Dominic's on Ventura Boulevard in Studio City, California, 41 tables were filled and 3 more had waiting parties standing near the host stand. The room smelled of garlic and warm bread. A ceiling fan turned slowly above the bar. Outside, the boulevard traffic moved without urgency, carrying people home from ordinary days. At a corner table near the back, a man sat with his wife and 2 young sons. He wore a plain flannel shirt and work boots. His hair was slightly damp, as if he had showered after a long afternoon. He had ordered the house pasta and a glass of water. He was not looking at anyone. He was cutting his food and handing pieces to the younger boy, who could not yet manage the fork on his own. In 22 seconds, a group of 4 men seated at the center of the room would make a decision they had already been building toward for 10 minutes. In the second after that, everything in Dominic's restaurant would become very still, and in the minute that followed, those 4 men would understand something about perception and consequence that no amount of training or pride had prepared them for. Nobody in that restaurant knew they were about to watch something they would describe to their children 30 years later. The 4 men at the center table had arrived at 7:15. They were large. The one who would speak first stood 6 feet 2 and weighed 231 pounds. He was 28 years old. He had played semi-professional football for 3 seasons in the mid-70s before a knee injury ended his eligibility, and he had spent the years since doing construction work and on weekends competing in amateur wrestling circuits in the San Fernando Valley. He had not lost a match in 14 months. He was the kind of man who filled a room by entering it, and he knew this, and he had spent enough years knowing it that the knowledge had become something else. Something harder, something that needed an audience. His 3 companions were built along similar lines, not fighters by training, but men who had spent their adult lives in physical work and believed, the way men sometimes do, that size was an argument that did not require finishing. They had been drinking since 6. They were loud in the way that men are loud when they are testing a room to see who will tell them to stop. No one had. At 7:43, the man in the flannel shirt at the corner table asked the waiter to bring a second glass of milk for his younger son. The boy had spilled the first one. It was a quiet, routine moment, the kind that fills a family dinner with small warmth. One of the 4 men at the center table said something to the others. They laughed. The one who had played football looked at the corner table and said something else. The laughter got louder. It was not aimed at the room. It was aimed at the corner. If you want to find out how the next minute of that evening unfolded, make sure you are subscribed and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from tonight. The man in the flannel shirt heard what was said. His wife heard it. His older son, who was 9, heard it and looked at his father. The younger boy did not understand the words but understood the tone, the way children do, and stopped eating. The man at the corner table set his fork down, not quickly, not with emphasis. He set it down the way a man sets down something he has finished using for a moment. He looked at his wife once. She looked back at him. That was all that passed between them. He stood. He did not push the chair back with drama. He did not crack his knuckles. He did not roll his neck or lift his chin or check to see who was watching. He simply moved from seated to standing in one unhurried motion and walked toward the center of the room. He was 5 feet 10. He weighed 174 pounds. He was 41 years old. He had no visible muscle under the flannel shirt. He was wearing work boots, and he walked in them the way a man walks who is comfortable in his own feet. A waitress near the service station stopped moving. She would say afterward that she stopped because something changed in the room, in the quality of the air, and she could not explain it in any more precise terms than that. The man from the corner table stopped 6 feet from the center table. He did not close the distance further. He stood where he stood, and he looked at the 4 men with an expression that the restaurant owner, who was watching from behind the bar, described 2 decades later as complete absence. Not anger, not threat. Absence, as though every unnecessary thing had been cleared away and what remained was simply attention. He has already lost, the man at the center table. He just does not know it yet. The one who had played football stood. He stood because sitting made him feel at a disadvantage, and because the men with him were watching, and because he had spent 14 months not losing and believed this had taught him something about himself that was permanent. He was 4 inches taller. He was 57 pounds heavier. He had his hands in front of him now, loose and low, the way wrestlers carry their hands before a hold. He said something. He said that the man in the flannel shirt should go back to his family and finish his dinner. He said it in a way that was meant to diminish. He said it in a way that offered a door out of the room, but made the door feel like a humiliation. The man in the flannel shirt said nothing. The one who had played football moved. He moved as large men move when they intend to control space, reaching forward and to the outside, trying to close the distance and gain a grip on the sleeve or the collar, the way wrestlers do when they want to negate a height disadvantage and bring the engagement to a form they understand.
He did not reach anything. A fight is not two men striking each other. A fight is a negotiation about distance. One man understands this, and one man does not. And the man who understands it does not need to strike first. Because he has already decided where he will be and where his opponent will not be. And that decision is made before the arms have moved.
The man in flannel was no longer where he had been. He had not jumped. He had not ducked in a dramatic fashion. He had moved 3 inches to the inside and 1 step forward, and the arm that had reached for him passed through nothing, and the large man's momentum carried him a half step past balance. Second one. The reach missed. The man in flannel had shifted his weight to his right foot and brought his left elbow up without completing the strike, a gesture that carried information rather than force. Information about geometry. About where the next exchange would happen. The large man recovered. He was athletic enough to recover quickly. He planted his rear foot and turned, and now his hands came up higher. And he moved forward again, this time lower, trying to reduce the target he offered. Second 3. He lunged. He lunged the way a wrestler lunges when patience has run out and forward pressure is the language he knows best. The man in flannel stepped to the outside. He let the momentum pass. His right hand came down on the back of the large man's left shoulder, not a strike, exactly. More a redirection, and for a moment the large man's face was pointed at the floor and his feet were scrambling and his hands were trying to find the ground. He found it. He caught himself before he fell. He straightened. His face had changed. The restaurant owner, watching from behind the bar, said that the expression he saw in that moment was not anger. It was the expression of a man who had asked a question he believed he knew the answer to, and had received an answer he did not understand, and needed to ask the question again, because the first answer could not be correct. The two companions who had been watching began to move. They did not stand with the urgency of men who intended to fight. They stood the way men stand when they realize the situation has moved beyond what they predicted, and they need to be closer to it to understand it. They stopped when the man in the flannel shirt looked at them. He did not say anything. He looked at them for 3 seconds. They did not move further. Second 7. The large man came forward a third time. This time there was less commitment in the motion. This time there was caution. And caution in a large man moving toward a smaller one is already a form of defeat. Because caution means the large man has already adjusted his expectation of what this moment contains. He threw a right hand. He threw it honestly, with weight behind it. The kind of punch that ends disagreements between men who are not trained. It was not slow. It was not telegraphed far in advance. In any ordinary situation it would have arrived. It did not arrive. The man in the flannel shirt moved his head 4 inches to the left. The hand went past his ear. His own right hand came up in the same motion, catching the forearm on the way through, and he stepped in behind it. And the large man's balance transferred forward, and for the second time in 10 seconds his feet were working to find the ground. This time they did not find it as quickly. He went down to one knee. He was there for 2 seconds. Not long, 2 seconds. But the room was completely silent for those 2 seconds. And 2 seconds of silence in a room of 40 people is a very long time, and every person in Dominic's restaurant was looking at the man on one knee on the tile floor, and then looking at the man standing above him in the flannel shirt, who had not raised his voice, and had not raised his hands above the level of conversation, and was simply standing there, breathing normally, waiting. The third companion did not move. He was looking at the man in the flannel shirt with an expression that had crossed over from caution into something closer to recognition. Not of a name, of a category, of the specific kind of stillness that belongs to men who have spent years doing something with their bodies until it became quiet. The large man got to his feet. He was breathing hard now. His knee was marked from the tile. His hands were at his sides. The man in the flannel shirt took one step forward and stopped. He was close now. Close enough that the large man could see the expression on his face, which had not changed from the moment he had stood up from the corner table. The absence was still there. Nothing added, nothing removed. He raised his right hand. He brought it toward the large man's left temple in a motion that was unhurried and completely controlled. It stopped 1 inch from the side of his head. It stopped there and held. The large man did not move. The man in the flannel shirt held it there for 3 seconds. Then he lowered his hand. He leaned in slightly and said something in a voice too low for the room to hear. No one at any of the 41 occupied tables heard the words. The large man heard them. His face changed again. A different kind of change this time, not the confusion of the early seconds. Something slower, something that moved from the eyes outward. The man in the flannel shirt straightened. He looked at the large man for 1 more second, then he turned and walked back to the corner table. He sat down. He picked up his fork. He looked at his older son, who was watching him with an expression 9-year-old boys wear when the world has just revealed a dimension they did not know it contained. He said something to the boy. He said it quietly. The boy nodded. The waiter brought the second glass of milk. The large man stood in the center of the room for a moment. The 3 men with him were looking at him, waiting. He had a choice to make, the way a man always has a choice in the moment after something has happened that he cannot undo. He could construct an explanation. He could find a technical reason why the ground had been different, why the angle had been wrong, why none of what had just happened meant what it clearly meant to everyone in the room. He did not do that. He walked back to the center table and he sat down. He did not look at the corner table again. He drank from his glass. He was quiet for the rest of the evening in a way that was different from the quiet of men who are waiting for another moment. It was the quiet of a man who has received accurate information about himself and is working out what to do with it. One of the waitresses, a woman named Carla who had worked at Dominic's for 11 years, walked past the corner table 30 minutes later and recognized the man in the flannel shirt from a photograph she had seen in a magazine 2 weeks before. She said nothing. She carried the check to the table and set it down and went back to the service station and stood there for a moment with her hand on the counter. She said later that what she felt was not surprise. She said she had already felt from the first second he stood up from the corner table that whoever this man was, the room had not seen him correctly at first. That it had corrected. Chuck Norris paid the check. He left a tip for the waiter, a standard amount, neither generous nor sparing, the action of a man who is done with the evening and moving on from it without drama. He helped his younger son into his jacket. He put on his own jacket, a denim one, which he had folded over the back of his chair at the start of the meal. He folded it once before putting it on, the habit of a man who does not leave his things in disarray. He walked his family out of Dominic's restaurant at 8:51 into the March air on Ventura Boulevard, where the traffic was still moving, and the streetlights were doing what streetlights do, and the evening continued around them as though nothing of particular consequence had occurred. The large man never entered a martial arts dojo. That is not the point of this story. The point is what Carla, the waitress, said when someone asked her years later what the most surprising part of the evening had been. She said the most surprising part was not what he could do. She said the most surprising part was that he waited. That he was patient. That he did not take anything from those men that they had not first taken from his family's dinner table. That when it was over, he sat back down, and he finished his meal, and he helped his son put on his jacket. The point is that the dangerous man is not the loudest one in the room. The dangerous man is the one who has nothing to prove, and proves it anyway, only when there is no other choice, and then puts it back down and has dinner. A man who knows what he is capable of does not carry it in his face. He carries it in his patience. Next week, we go inside. The afternoon, Bruce Lee walked into Chuck Norris's training session uninvited, watched for 11 minutes without speaking, and then said 4 words that Norris said changed the way he thought about combat for the rest of his career. That story has never been told in full. Stay with us.